All right, welcome. So, before we get started, a couple of announcements. Once again, if you have anything you want to show off, I know somebody here does that he would like to show off sometime. Not today. Just let one of us know, Hayden or I, and we can totally just like set aside some time, like 5-10 minutes, whatever you need, show off any games you're working on. And then, just so you know, next week is the music workshop, which you will be leading at 7, and I'll be in here. And then it is past the time for t-shirts, or I guess you can give some to me now if you want to. Otherwise, we're done. And otherwise, it is $10 for dues, which you can also pay anytime it's for the Game Jam, which is on March 4 through 6, if you don't know already. So, yeah. This is your
All right. So here's a infamous quote. A delayed game is eventually good, but a rushed game is forever bad. And that was by the legendary Shigeru Miyamoto. All right. But today we're gonna not listen to that advice at all. So we are going to be talking about how to speedrun a game. But first, we need to start talking about how to start speedrunning a game. So let's get into it.
So here's the short version of it, okay? You make the game, you make money, and you're done.
You don't have to make money. That's just something people can do. We're a hobbyist club, so it's an option.
But you can't. So the question is, how did you not think of this? And the answer is, I don't know. But here's some tips for getting started. So first question you should be thinking of is like, what do I use? And like, what is my goal here? So you kind of want to create a plan to get started, especially if you're in like a time crunch. So if you want to make a game fast, like you want to know what you're doing, because otherwise it's like you kind of get lost in time trying to just make features. So the goal or the solution to that is to make a roadmap or a game design document. This can be anything from just like a Word document to like a notebook drawing, kind of whatever you think is best for you. Just something to like organize your thoughts, basically. And then after that, you kind of want to like look at what you have. What type of game are you making? Are you making like a platformer? Making like a, I don't know, Dance Dance Revolution something. Then you want to like kind of pick the engine, the art style, sound design, anything else. But just like remember your time constraint. So if you're making something in 48 hours, it's totally going to change what you're making, like the art style compared to like 2 months or longer. So just like keep that in mind.
This is really important if you're working with a team, because it's really important to kind of get the groundwork kind of laid out and make sure that everybody knows what they're doing. And we're going to go into this more specifically in a minute, but that's just kind of an overview of what we'll be talking about.
So after you've got all your everything organized, then you want to make the minimum viable product. So if you don't know already what that is, it's like the bare bones to a video game. Usually it's just like you don't even add in art. It's literally just like you have a character that can jump around and shoot things, and like that's like the bare, like that is a game technically, but it's not really like a good one. That's just like, so you have something that's working. And then just to emphasize, make sure you actually make a game that you can finish. So like if you're in a game jam, you're not going to be able to make some complicated game. It's usually something very simple, because it's usually much better to make something that looks cool as opposed to something that's half done and doesn't really look that great. So the roadmap or design document, same thing. What is it, and why does it matter, and what happens if you don't have one? So what it is, kind of like what I said earlier, it's just like a document that you make that you kind of like organize all your thoughts. Word document, drawing, whatever. But like it matters because it's like, well, yeah, to get organized. But like Hayden said, if you're in a group, it really matters. If you're by yourself, usually you can think of these things like in your head. Like, okay, I'm going to make a Mario-like game. It's going to have 2 bad guys, whatever. But like if you're with somebody else, it's kind of hard to like communicate that with them. I mean, yeah, you can say something, but you guys are going to have 2 totally different images in your head as to what it should be. So the last thing you want to do is like you each go your own ways, working for like a couple hours, and then you come back and it's like totally not what you were expecting.
We had a question. I saw we had a question.
Why does this ship go down land?
I did not notice that. Yeah.
Bro, I don't know. I just looked up flip art map.
Unintentional game design.
I don't know. Maybe it's the video game they're making. Maybe it's about swimming on land.
Land sharks.
Yeah, land sharks. But yeah, what happens if you don't have one? Something like that. Okay, your boat might be swimming on the land unintentionally. Something that you don't want to run into.
I don't use one.
I do. I'm a strong believer in roadmaps.
It's not that I'm not a believer in roadmaps. I think they should be done as you work on the game. Because if you sit down and you make this massive roadmap with like everything you possibly want to do, it's really easy to commit to those things. And we're going to be talking about later why it's important to be able to trim things off as well. Yes.
Review roadmaps are really helpful in making pipelines that I can bring later.
Yeah, I mean it's up to you, right? I don't use one. That's how I work. But this might be a way that might help you a lot. So we're just recommending that you at least give this a shot if you haven't done it before. And it might help you. You might think it stinks, and then you can ignore our advice. So
It's really subjective.
Yeah.
Engine choice. So, what type of game are you making? That's going to play a huge role into what engine you should pick. If you have experience with one engine and the game that you're doing like fits in that category, like if you use Game Maker Forever and you're doing a 2D game, that's like perfect for it. But sometimes it might be best to choose a different engine. Say that you're doing something in like 3D. So like if you're doing 2D, some good engines for that would be like Game Maker Studio 2, Godot, or Godot, whatever, Scratch or Unity, Scratch. Or if you're doing something in 3D, I'd recommend like Unreal Engine, Unity, or like Godot is starting to have some 3D stuff built in.
Yeah, they have some stuff. It's still like a lot of stuff that they need to add features to. If you really want to get experimental, you can add features yourself. It's kind of like how they're working with it. So it's getting there. Godot's getting there, but I highly recommend Godot for just 2D games because it's like a free engine like Game Maker Studio, but completely free and has a lot of cool features for 2D game development.
That's what it was meant for originally too. So, but if you use Unreal or Unity particularly, there's like a ton of online tutorials for that stuff too. So, I don't know.
Just an engine.
It's an engine. So art style choice. Okay. So after you think about like your art style choice, so usually most people do like pixel art, or you have like realistic or abstract, I guess. I don't know. There's a lot of options. You kind of want to think about like what software you're going to be using. If you're using pixel art, you want to do like Sprite if you're willing to spend some money on it. Or Pixel Studio is my go-to free one. Otherwise, real art, I think Photoshop, somebody else can back me up here if they know anything, but I think GIMP is a good free one. That one's also used for pixel art. But and then again, how much time do you have? Because if you're really good at making art, like that's great and all, but if you only have like 24 hours, you can only do so much. Making like a realistic looking character in 24 hours. So sometimes it might be easier just to cut down and do something like pixel art where it's really easy to make something pretty quickly. But
the big claim is that like, independent game developers use pixel art because it's like hipster-ish or whatever. It's the reason everybody does it is because it's really fast and easy to do. If you're gonna hand draw out all of your animations, it takes a long time. The second easiest way is obviously if you're going to do modeling and stuff like that. But even then, you can texture the models with pixel art because that's another really fast, kind of quick way to go about doing that and making textures. And it's just really convenient and cheap. The software is cheap. Sprite's like $20. Something like Toon Boom or what's the main Photoshop,
yes.
Adobe. Illustrate, whatever. Anyway, all that professional art software is really expensive, so pixel art software is going to be like 10, 20 bucks tops, or just free. So that's why we highly recommend that. Especially if you're new and you're not.
Microsoft Paint comes pre-installed on every Windows device. So. I think Paint.net is free, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that one's pretty good too.
We did use Paint for our game.
Yes.
No, Piscal. I got started with Piscal.
Yeah, Piscal. Yeah, Piscal is really similar to Pixel Art Studio. I've used both of them, and I think, or Pixel Studio. I think Pixel Studio is better personally.
Yeah, whatever works best for you.
Yeah. And then, what are you or your team good at? Because especially if you're not working by yourself, then it's really easy to like divvy up the work. And then if you have more people, and you have the option to like make some cool art or something, you should totally do it. But then again, it's all about, it's kind of like your own judgment call. And also, Hayden's tip of the day, use pixel art. It's fast and cheap and easy. Don't listen to it. You saw this already, so it kind of ruined it. Next is sound design or musical choices. So again, just like art, I mean, this is a form of art technically. Like, what are you or your team good at? So if you have somebody on your team that's really good at music, definitely take advantage of it, because original music and sound effects is always like amazing. Otherwise, like if you kind of suck at music, like I do, you can just look at.
And don't ask people for free stuff, because that doesn't usually go over well.
Yes. Okay, so talked about the minimum viable product. I'm going to elaborate on it a little more now. So, like I said earlier, you want get something that works first, which is also known as like a prototype. So you want to think of like what's the core part of your game, and then you really want to like hone down on that and make sure you get it to work. So if you're doing like a top-down shooter, you want to make sure that you get like at least a box or something that can, one, rotate, two, like shoot, maybe like reloading or something. And then anything you do on top of that, and bad guys, of course, and then anything you do on top of that is like just adding on to it and making it more of an actual game. So yeah, like it says, you want to iterate over it until you finally have a working project. So you kind of start with like one thing. Like in my example I just gave, like if you start with like just getting it to rotate towards the mouse or whatever, and then it's like make sure that works and then move on, because otherwise if you try to do it all at once and you run into like problems with the code not running, then it's like, okay, where is it at? Because like you have no idea. You just did it all in like half an hour or so.
Best way to think about it, a couple examples would be, imagine like Mario in a blank void, right? Mario's just a box, and the box can jump around and stuff. And then you ask yourself, is that fun? And then you can continue if it's fun, right? Mario Kart, it's a cart on a circular track. It's just a box, not even a cart. It's just a box that can move on a circular track, and it counts your lap time. Is that fun? Okay, you can move on. It's just about taking the main gameplay loop of your game, breaking it down to the simplest form, trying it out, seeing if it's actually fun and enjoyable, and then if that works out, then you can move on to the next step, start adding cool mechanics, enemies. If your main gameplay loop isn't fun and you find that out, then that's great. You didn't spend a bunch of time making art assets for a game that nobody's going to want to play. So that's why it's so important to do this right off the bat really quickly.
And if you're not sure if it's fun, ask somebody. That always works. Okay.
So this is just an example. So I don't know if anybody here's played Braid before. It's a really good game by a guy named Jonathan Blow, and it's basically a game where you can like die and reverse time to solve puzzles, right? So if you die, you can hold the left trigger and it'll reverse time around, and just kind of like a cool mechanic. But anyway, long story short, he did an MVP here on the left side. This is like what it looked like when he was testing his boss fight out. Really basic bare bones art, obviously not finished, just to kind of show what, like you can kind of tell that's a lamp that's falling down on him, or a chandelier I should say. You can tell there's an enemy below him. You can tell he's climbing on some sort of fencing, but it doesn't look very good. The level design's maybe a little rough. And that's just, he tried it out. He thought, this is really fun. This is really engaging. Let's go on and flesh this out now. And then on the right side is the actual finished version of what he did for that game.
So, how do you actually speedrun the game making process? So, first thing is you want to keep to your deadlines. So this ties back into like making a roadmap. One of the things you want to do when you make that is like kind of set out, or maybe not even if you make a roadmap, just at least set out some different times that you want to have something done by. So, like in the game jams that we host every semester, we usually try to give out like a rough estimate of how far you should be by every hour of the game jam. And this is just to like make sure that you're on schedule, because you don't want to like get stuck on something for too long and then get to the showcase and something doesn't work or otherwise. So that's why it's good to like have deadlines to make sure that, okay, like if something doesn't work, you just move on because you don't have time for it anymore.
And if your teammates aren't meeting the deadlines, you don't have to like run up to them and be like, all right, what's going on, man? We're kicking you off the team if you don't get this done. Like, it's good to have a deadline pretty early, so that way you're like, okay, this is when we need to get this done by. And then if they start to miss it, you can ask them like, and we'll go into this in a second. Do we need to cut this feature? Is this too much? Is this too difficult? Just talk to us. Just ask your teammates to talk to you why aren't they meeting their deadlines? Because there's usually a good reason for it. Not everybody's just blowing off their work and not trying to get stuff done.
So this kind of ties back into that again. If you can't get something to work, just move on. Sometimes it's better to have something that actually works as opposed to something that does not. So I hope that meme is relatable to all you young folk.
This is different than an MVP. All right, if you can't get your MVP to work, then the whole game needs to be reworked. This is like, I'm making a Mario game and we put springs in the Mario game. If the spring isn't working, then we cut the spring out, or we repurpose the spring into something else, right? We get the spring, you can pick the spring up so we can have a throwable object maybe and repurpose that part. But the bouncing on the spring isn't working. We can't figure out how to get the code done, and it's going to take us another week. Let's just cut it out. And it's really hard to do when you're actually making a game, because you really want to have that spring in. Trust me. But at the end of the day, there's no point in having a spring if there is no game for the spring to be in, right? So.
And another way of going about it is just like trying to think of it differently. So say that you're like trying to implement stairs and you really just can't figure it out. Maybe instead of doing stairs, you just do like a sloped ground or something. There's always different ways of working around something with having the same like a purpose. So next thing is actually work on it. So if you don't do anything, like if you just kind of push it to the side, nothing's going to get done. So it's kind of like playing piano. If you know about that, like you got to do it consistently. Like putting 5 minutes to the side every day or even longer to be able to work on the game is like, that's way better than just not working on it at all. And maybe doing it all in like a little bit. Sometimes, especially like if you get stuck, it's a really good idea to take a break and come back later to have a fresh mind of looking at it.
Doing something, anything on it, even if you have a really busy week, you got a lot going on, then just setting like just 5-10 minutes aside just to think about something to work on in the future is huge. Ideally, you want to have more. I'll get to you in just a second. I see your hand raised. Even if you just set aside like a good chunk of time, it's even better, because then you can actually get some work done. It's really hard to get something done in 5 minutes, but 5 minutes is, again, better than absolutely nothing. So, yes.
As a musician,
Yes.
to effectively actually set aside 5 minutes, you need to write down and make a schedule and stick to the schedule. Otherwise, you're not going to fall through it.
Great advice, which is why we mentioned that you should have a schedule to stick to. So, along with having a schedule of deadlines to meet, like Sasha said, make sure that you also have a deadline of, or not a deadline, but a schedule of when you're going to set time aside to do things, right? Maybe you have a lower class load on Thursdays, so you can set aside an hour on Thursdays, every Thursday, just to work on stuff no matter what. Obviously, if things come up and you got to move it, then you can move that hour around, sometimes in a different part of the week or whatever you got to do. But just setting time aside is huge, because it makes sure that you're always working on it no matter what.
Did you do some font on it?
No.
Oh, why is it all weird?
Oh.
It was legible. So here's how to actually finish Yes.
Can you return to previous slide?
I wish I knew how.
Just hit like the background.
Oh, okay.
What's the first thing with bottom screen?
Okay, it says. I don't know why. I don't know why the meme font is all weird, but it says.
He did nothing all day, and now he has no game.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know why the font got removed though. I literally that was not what it looked like. Yeah. You're welcome. Yeah. So here's how to actually finish speedrunning the game. So the first thing you want to do when you're starting to wrap things up is to play test. Just run through it quick, make sure that everything's working, because maybe you've been developing it for a long time, haven't tested out any features fully. You want to make sure that the game actually plays like a game. Moves from scene to scene, and this is just to make sure they have something. So if something doesn't work, go back and try to fix it really quickly, depending on how much time you have. It's always a good idea too, just to play test periodically, but towards the end is when you really want to make sure it's completely working. And if it works, just move on. You're done. It works, so it's good.
Ideally, you want to be playtesting all the time, right? Get a feature done, get a mechanic done, playtest it a ton to make sure it doesn't break or anything like that. But when you're in a scenario where you're just trying to get things done really quickly, especially at a game jam, for example, and this stuff applies to just good practice in general. But if you were at say a game jam, you wouldn't want to be taking an hour to just play your game halfway through the competition. You should be doing that more towards the end when you're making sure that everything's going to work for the showcase. Think of it that way, right? Even on a larger scale project you're trying to get done in just a year, towards the end of the year when you're going to show it off to people, make sure that it works, right? And all the mechanics that you've been trying to get done works. That way you can see what you need to allocate more time to polishing, which we'll get into, or you can spend more time on more features.
Yes.
I want to add, after experience, is that do play testing other than for looking for bugs. Use it for testing if the game is too hard or not, because it might make a game that people can't do on level like that.
That's great advice. That's
Yeah.
great advice. Also, make sure you play test just to make sure that it's fun, right? There's no point in making this awesome game that you think is really fun and enjoyable, and then somebody comes and tries to play it. And you're this is really boring to me, right? Or a bunch of people think it's just not entertaining because you just didn't have enough people try it out.
What's this point of the game?
That is really boring. Well, then you want to play test to make sure it is boring.
Yeah.
The next thing is boring or something.
Play test with a purpose.
I really hope it isn't the next thing.
No, well, I can't say.
Well, one down, more ideas.
So the next is polishing, not to be confused with polishing. I got that one from Hayden. You're welcome. So this one is not as important if you're running on a tight schedule, because at least if you play test it and all works, at least it works. Okay, that's a game. So this is just something if you have extra time towards the end, you want to kind of just not necessarily add, but just fix things up so they look really pretty. So maybe if you have this texture that's been bothering you the whole time you've been working on the game, maybe you want to rework it really quick.
Yeah. So polishing is a really broad topic, right? It can mean anything from mechanically to audibly to visually. When we talk about polishing in this sense, we mainly mean visually and audibly, and that can have to do with mechanics, but for the most part, it's important that the person who's going to be experiencing your game doesn't see the character jittering around, or the sound clipping, or something really major, because those things stand out first and foremost. They don't always catch if you press the jump button and you don't jump. That's really bad. Don't get me wrong, but it's not as apparent as something visually on screen moving around rapidly or something really gross. So if you're in a really, really, really tight time crunch situation and you were coming down to stuff like this, do the visual and audible stuff first, and then kind of swing back around and kind of iron out, make sure everything is working mechanically as well.
So the last thing is to let go. You got to know when to stop. You got to know when it's over. Because if you just keep trying to add things in the last minute, all it takes is you to change something that looks like it shouldn't break anything, but then it does. Then you're screwed, especially if you have a deadline. That's why usually, like the last hour of a game jam or so, you don't want to do anything. You just want to make sure that you, like, I don't know, take screenshots or something and just be done, especially if you can. Because if you keep trying to work on it, yeah, like I said, it's just a recipe for disaster.
A lot of people make the game for fun. They'll put something together in like a weekend, even if it's not for a game jam. Just try to get a small project together, and they want to reach its full potential. But for the most part, they're done with it. They want to move on and do new things, and you should do that. So if you're done with the project, not feeling like working on it anymore, a lot of time for this club, we're not making full-fledged, games that we're planning to release. We're just doing independent hobbyist projects. So when you're done with a hobbyist project, like give yourself a break. Go, move on. Work on the next project. Come up with the next idea. Experiment with the new engine that you're trying out. It's just good to do in general.
So that about wraps everything up. Once again, if you have anything you want to show off, please contact me. Otherwise, yeah, workshop next weekend or next week on Tuesday, back in here at 7. We'll be doing music. And again, if you want to pay dues, go for it. Just come to me or just wait till next time so you can get right to winner. That's it. Go forth, make games, and be awesome.